When it comes to Harris herself, a few years ago, you were running in the Democratic primary against Harris. You believed that you were best positioned to beat Donald Trump. Why do you think Vice President Harris is the best candidate to beat Donald Trump now?
Well, I think we've seen it even just in the last 48 hours, the speed with which she has brought the party together and the energy with which she has not just, as she sometimes says, prosecuted the case against Donald Trump, but also begun to lay out the kind of vision that is going to make Americans better off. It's a phenomenal contrast between President Trump, who is consumed by his own past, and Kamala Harris, who is talking about our future. I also really admired the focus on freedom. That was a really big part of her comments today and yesterday, because I think that's a big part of what is at stake. I'm old enough to remember.
We're just chatting out like him. He's a careerist. He's a dangerously neoliberal individual who is literally like the classic bicoastal elitist archetype. I mean, he worked at McKinsey. He's easily the best orator in the Democratic Party. Stop hating Hasan. Bro, what are you talking about? Look at Donald Trump, man. What are we talking about? Oh, he's the best orator. Like, that's not enough. He reads this phony. He is super captivating for everyone with a globe emoji on Twitter, everyone with a Ukrainian flag in their bio on Twitter, and that's like 150 total people, okay? He's a great orator in the same way that JD Vance is a good orator. They're both like utilizing this TED Talk style of speaking. It matters not how you feel about it. It matters how everyone else reads his character.
When freedom was something you usually heard talked about on the Republican side and among conservatives, but right now, I think we have many, many examples why Americans will experience more secure freedom under a Kamala Harris presidency than under a return to the chaos of Donald Trump and the systematic reduction of freedom, starting, of course, with Donald Trump following through on his promise to end a woman's freedom to choose and access abortion rights in this country.
Well, and Donald Trump said today that he does want to debate Vice President Harris, maybe more so than once. One of the issues that
only after backing out of the debate he already agreed to, though, right? Somehow
today he has an issue with doing it with ABC.
Right, but he didn't when he agreed to it in the first place, right? I mean, I think the interesting thing about this is what changed from when he said he was ready to do an ABC debate and when he now says he's not. ABC didn't change. Donald Trump didn't change. But there's a new candidate, and clearly he hesitates to debate her on the exact same terms that he thought
so you think
would
he's
be okay.
Scared to debate her?
Yeah.
Why do you think so?
Because I think she is going to be so effective, and she's going to lay bare his inability to talk about anything but himself and his past. I think what you'll see is two things that I'm excited for Americans to see. Yes, the contrast, the way, as she laid out very powerfully, she, as a prosecutor who has defended people from people like Donald Trump, is going to remind everybody about that record, but also a contrast in governing records. She's going to be, I think, very effective in reminding Americans that on issue after issue, they already agree with us. They already agree with her and Democrats. Americans agree with Democrats and disagree with Donald Trump on taxes and his agenda of tax cuts for the rich. They agree with Kamala Harris, Democrats, and disagree with Donald Trump on his removal of the right to choose in this country. And, gun violence, marriage, you can go on down the list.
Former Mayor of South Bend is literally the most hilarious qualification for a presidential candidate. The fact that he was handed the transportation job is ridiculous. Is it, though? I think they are straight up propping him up to be the most CIA adjacent president that the Democratic Party could ever put forward. He speaks 8 languages. I don't care. I don't. What do you mean? Okay, cool. Great. He's a nerd. I hate how corporate he is. Listen, man, Mitt Romney is also this like brilliant corporate guy. Okay, look at the way the American public perceived him. They're posting him up to give him a higher profile. He can't win a single seat in his state. Yeah. Like Xiaoma, New York City, speaks like 16 languages. You don't see me advocating for him to run for president. What a ridiculous qualification. You're reminded that Andy Beshear's children go to public school and have for years. Don't get Kentucky facts from this Ron DeSantis fanboy. Yeah, he's so pro-public education that he sends his kids to private school. Yeah, Andy Beshear is not only a fucking massive advocate for public schools, he's anti-charter school, and his kids literally go to public school. No, he's so solid on that front. That's like one of his strong suits, in my opinion. But
I think she's very well positioned to remind Americans of that fact.
Well, and Trump also has a record on immigration. We saw what he did with the bill that was negotiated by some Republicans, a bipartisan group on Capitol Hill earlier. But there's also a record for the Biden administration, and it's been one of the lower points where they have polled, and it is also a top concern for voters. So what does that look like for Harris as, how she defends how the Biden administration has handled immigration, but also maybe trying to separate herself from some of those decisions.
Well, I think she's going to be able to, again, remind Americans of the difference between somebody who's focused on solutions and somebody who is focused on anything that can divide us. This bipartisan immigration bill that Donald Trump helped to kill would have made a difference at the border. And it was negotiated, by the way, with very conservative Republicans as well as Democrats. Why did Donald Trump kill that? Well, because he actually needs things to be terrible at the border. He's not interested.
That's crazy. That's crazy that she thought, like, what are you doing? Okay, come here. Come. God damn it. So cute. It's crazy how cute she is. Adorable. She just got up and stood by my side like I wouldn't notice. I can't resist her. She's the best. Yeah, I hate this narrative surrounding the right-wing immigration bill that we're considering a bipartisan immigration bill. It's just a right-wing immigration bill. It's just being passed by Democrats with the worst instincts possible. Like, hypocrisy baiting on this front is so unimaginably brain dead. It's so unimaginably stupid. It's just like you are gift wrapping fascism, both in terms of policy and politics, to the right.
Interested in the immigration issue or the border issue becoming less chaotic. Chaos is his oxygen. He is for anything that will make it more chaotic in this country, which is why, again, he went out of his way to intervene in a congressional process and block that compromise from happening.
Yeah, but if she's pressed on, after that was sunk, you saw President Biden sign an executive order cracking down on asylum seekers at the border and what those limits look like depending on how many people are crossing the border each day. If she's pressed on an issue like that, does she defend it? Does she say that it was the right move at the right time? Or is there room for her to stake new ground on something like that?
Well, we'll see how she speaks to that and how she wants to lead the conversation on that. But she will already be in a position to talk about an administration, the Biden-Harris administration, that made tough choices to help with this issue. And someone like Donald Trump, who has gone out of his way to make this issue worse, because the worse it is for America, the better it is for him.
There's a new Marist poll out today as we're in this search for a running mate. It actually is you at the top of it. Also, Governor of Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer, both are on 21%. That's among Democrats and Democratic-leaning voters. We've heard a lot of governors being on this list. Do you believe that a cabinet secretary with a residence in Michigan who's from Indiana should be on that list?
It's day 2 since President Biden made his decision. What I know is that nobody's more of an expert, other than maybe Joe Biden. Nobody's more of an expert on the vice presidency and on how that process should work than somebody like Kamala Harris. I know she's going to have a process and make a decision that makes sense for her, for the party, and for the country.
Yeah. Have you had any conversations about it though, or?
I've had one conversation with her, and it was on Sunday, and it was about how excited I am for her to lead this party and the fact that I was going to support her. The ticket did not come up.
Okay, so nothing on the ticket there. Donald Trump said today that he doesn't regret picking J.D. Vance as his vice presidential nominee in this process, despite the fact that it happened before he knew that Harris was going to be at the top of the ticket, as we believe. Do you think that there's someone she could pick as her vice president that would make him regret that choice?
Well, again, that's going to be her call, her process. But what I will say is that the choice of J.D. Vance is a regrettable choice, because he's somebody who was at his most convincing and effective when he talked about how unfit for office Donald Trump is. And he is not.
He's so good. Yeah, the most effective counter to J.D. Vance is literally Waltz or Bashar, especially Bashar. He knows that. Ain't nobody him in the Rust Belt. They hate him in the Rust Belt, actually. When he's the type of guy that you see outside of the Motel 6 in your hometown, you know there's mass layoffs coming. And I mean that literally and figuratively. Pete Buttigieg, the only time when a guy like him comes into your town, you're about to watch a facility close down, okay? That's precisely what he did when he was at McKinsey, and that's precisely how he carries himself. Or there's a chemical spill, and he's haphazardly trying to do PR for the administration. Neither of which are good things. He is like a plague rat. His presence is unsettling. Bashir, on the other hand, and Waltz, on the other hand, are fairly popular, if not very popular, governors with a long track record, not long, but like a decent track record of fighting and winning good progressive policies and good progressive legislation for their constituents, not even just their constituents, but everyone in their states. So those would be the two perfect foils. I mean, one's Kentucky. Both could claim Appalachia to a certain degree. Both can claim Rust Belt to a certain degree. They're good. They're popular. And those would be the perfect foil to J.D. Vance. If anything, I suspect Pete Buttigieg would be the worst possible pick for J.D. Vance, because him and J.D. Vance are cut from the same cloth. They're cut from the same cloth in the sense that they're both like corpo rats, and they read as corpo rats in a way that is very unsettling to, like, you know, regular Americans. There's a lot of talent in the Democratic Party. Pete Buttigieg is not one of them.
Not explained any reason, other than, of course, his obvious interest in power, why he would have changed his mind on that. Remember, J.D. Vance's whole identity is that he is connected to Appalachia, a place that is being hurt so profoundly by the opioid crisis. So the fact that he didn't just refer to Donald Trump as an idiot, though he didn't just say all kinds of things about how he was terrible, but compared Donald Trump to opioids, that is literally the darkest, most negative thing someone connected to Appalachia could possibly say about a politician. And that was in public, right? In private, he was comparing him to Hitler, reportedly. He has yet to explain why his opinion would be any different other than his own search for power.
So when he says, I watched Donald Trump in office, that's what changed my mind, you're not buying that.
That doesn't make any sense, especially coming from the Midwest. He's from Ohio. I grew up in Indiana and live in Michigan. I have seen how the industrial Midwest went into a manufacturing recession under Donald Trump and has experienced a manufacturing renaissance under the Biden-Harris administration. Why is that? Because the Biden-Harris administration has led on policies that have factories rising out of the ground of places, including places like near where I grew up, that haven't seen this kind of investment in a generation. How could J.D. Vance or anybody else initially think that Donald Trump is a disaster, watch him lead the country into a manufacturing recession? This is, by the way, before COVID, let alone everything that happened through the mismanagement of COVID, and then say, oh, now I've seen the light. He's a great leader and I want to be on his.
There's absolutely no delay in his response. He's really conversational. It doesn't feel scripted like other candidates. I hate this community, dog. Y'all are literally going to neoliberal prison under the Pete regime. Under the Pete regime, every single one of you are going to prison. I hope, and you deserve it. Make him press secretary. Keep that man away from power.
His team. I think we all know why J.D. Vance changed his mind.
Do you think Harris will be able to appeal to those, skeptical working class voters in a Michigan, in a Wisconsin, in a Pennsylvania? Those are voters that Biden had real crossover appeal with them in 2020. Do you think Harris will be able to have that outreach to them?
Yes, and I think the reason is, again, that most voters where I come from agree with her on most issues. We talked about taxes, right? The Republican Party, whether we're talking about Donald Trump or J.D. Vance, despite the kind of faux populism, they are about tax cuts for the rich and for corporations. One of the few promises that Donald Trump actually kept was the one to cut taxes for the rich. That's what they're about. And by the way, they're also against things like the minimum wage, against labor unions. J.D. Vance got I think a 0% rating from the AFL-CIO. You compare that with Kamala Harris, who is a distinct leader in her own right, but also part of an administration that is the most pro-union in modern American history.
He's a very good communicator. Keep him the away from power, dude. He is genuinely a terrifying sociopathic figure. I don't think people understand. He is very good on paper. He has a great resume, and I think he would lead America into like a second Thatcher style neoliberal regime like Ronald Reagan.
History. There are so many issues, bread and butter issues, like questions on the cost of childcare that Donald Trump was literally, it seemed, incapable of even hearing during the first debate, certainly incapable of responding to, which is something that Kamala Harris has been very focused on, making it easier and more affordable to raise a family in this country.
That childcare answer in the debate from both candidates was, I think, kind of confounding to everyone. But I'm glad you brought up children, because there's actually this answer that J.D. Vance gave a few years ago, and he name-dropped you in it about people who don't have children working in the government. This is what he said.
It's just a basic fact. You look at Kamala Harris, Pete Buttigieg, AOC, the entire future of the Democrats is controlled by people without children. And how does it make any sense that we've turned our country over to people who don't really have a direct stake in it?
Now, I should note you have two children. They were born before Pete gave that answer. Harris is also a stepmom to children as well. But what's your response to that?
The really sad thing is he said that after Chasten and I had been through a fairly heartbreaking setback in our adoption journey. He couldn't have known that, but maybe that's why you shouldn't be talking about other people's children. And it's not about his kids or my kids or the vice president's family. It's about your family, people's families whose well-being will depend on whether we go into a future led by somebody like Kamala Harris, who is focused on expanding the prosperity, the freedom, the well-being of our families. And by the way, especially if you have kids and you're worried about climate, choosing between a party that has a plan on climate that creates jobs and a party.
He's literally so Patrick Bateman coded. I don't know how else to describe it. Like it's very clean. It's very calculated. There's not a single emotion beyond anger behind those eyes. He is a perfect consultant. This is what Mitch McConnell sounded like as a young man, probably. I don't know. I mean, Mitch McConnell was a young man in like 1930s. So is Mayor Pete having a hand in the Canadian bread price fixing scandal just a meme or actually true? No, that is actually true. Like the top of the hour ad break is actually true. He's a great attack dog for the Democrats. Put him as press secretary. I'm perfectly fine with that. He probably wouldn't take that position because he has higher aspirations. But anyway.
That still calls it a hoax, even as we went through the hottest day in world history? Or do you want your children to grow up in a country defined by a return to the chaos and recrimination and cruelty that was the hallmark of the Trump era?
Hi, I'm Clint Webb, and I'm running for Senate. I have a short cropped haircut, a pretty enough yet accessible looking wife, and a newborn baby that I've dressed in a suit to prove to you that I mean business. For the last 15 years, I've lived my life in such a bland, uncontroversial, and repressed manner that it's almost unnatural.
I still don't really see what your issue with him is, other than his highs to like the position so far as mayor. Have you ever heard of the term, like, we should never make someone who really wants to be king the king? Like, it's not a term, but like the statement that, like, you should never get someone who really wants to be president to be president. Colloquialism. That's a pretty solid warning about Mayor Pete. Mayor Pete has been angling the presidential position since he was like 12 years old. Absolutely. He is basically an empty vessel filled to the brim with neoliberalism, but he will hide those worse elements of his policy prescriptions by trying to dance around the issues. He is hard to pin down on policy prescriptions. Oftentimes, I tracked his campaign very closely in 2019. His record as the mayor of South Bend, Indiana was abysmal in terms of like refusing to do something about the white supremacy that was going on in his police force at a time when Black Lives Matter was in the forefront of the conversation. So obviously that played a pretty major role against Pete Buttigieg. I believe you when you say we need to be wary of someone. Yes. In South Bend, Indiana, his revitalization attempts were also utterly abysmal, very much neoliberal. It's the classic, like, let's turn South Bend, Indiana into Silicon Valley type shit.
Another of your clients, Loblaws, the grocery chain, has since said that it was involved in the price fixing of bread during the time that you were analyzing grocery prices for them. I'm curious first, just did you analyze the price of bread for them? Was that part of your remit?
Not in any detail. So basically the way my job worked was they have about 50,000 items that they sold, and I was creating and then crunching a database. And what we would do is we would figure out, based on a year's worth of sales, if they tried to cut a certain percent off their prices across a certain number of hundreds of stores, what would the impact of that be? So bread was probably one of the UPC codes in there, but I didn't pay attention to one product over another.
Mm-hmm. When you were working at McKinsey, did you understand the company's purpose to be exclusively maximizing its own profitability? Did you understand the purpose of the companies you worked for to be exclusively to maximize their profitability?
Well, many of my clients, as you know, were public sector and nonprofit, so obviously their function was not about profitability. Yeah. But yes, I worked for a company, a for-profit company.
Do you think that that should be the sole mission of a corporation, though, to maximize profitability?
Well, I think that there's something to be said for the dialogue that's happening with, for example, what's going on in the Business Roundtable. But also, this is where policy needs to come in. We can't expect corporate America to spontaneously change what...
Damn, by the way, he lost so much hair. Big dog, you got to get on minoxidil pronto. Hey, yo, that New York Times journalist owned him so hard, he started looking like him.
It is about without imposing different kinds of left and right boundaries. And to me, where the public sector and the function of regulation meets what private companies do is precisely to set up those kinds of boundaries. So I welcome any time a company undertakes, what is called corporate social responsibility, charitable activity.
Dude, come on. Dude, look at this. Look at what he's doing. He's a PR man, dude. Just no real answer. All word salads, but it actually plays so well to like a very specific kind of liberal who fancies themselves to be an intellectual, who wants a guy to just say the right things.
Or other factors in what they care about. I've been very interested to see the development of things like B Corp.
Obviously, because of his background, he can't turn around and be like, no, I don't think that is the only thing that corporations care about. And I think it's actually utterly repugnant that that kind of attitude and that kind of sentiment is exactly why we have water supply being poisoned all around the country. We have forever chemicals that are destroying the next generation and the previous generation that was destroyed by lead poisoning. Okay, he can't do that because he worked at McKinsey fixing bread prices. Do you understand? But a lot of you look at this guy and go, ooh, he's fancy. He uses fancy words, big man.
Which has been a big conversation, especially around South Bend, actually, because one of the pioneering ones was a company called Better World Books that grew kind of up and around Notre Dame. But I also don't think we should be naive about how corporations...
I'm serious. You work for a corp. What's his responsibility? Exactly that. He's doing the best he can. Hey, guess what, dude? I don't want a guy who worked at McKinsey to be president ever. Do you understand? Ever. That is literally a reality that even Republicans came to terms with respect to Mitt Romney. Do you understand me? And Mitt Romney was a significantly more progressive figure in terms of the rest of the Republican Party than Pete Buttigieg is. He's a corpo rat. That's the whole point. Mitt Romney was at Bain. He's at McKinsey. These are consulting firms. Their entire job is to eliminate redundancy, which is to engage in mass layoffs, cut corners at the behest of the corporate bottom line, at the behest of increasing shareholder value. That is all these guys do. They're mercenaries. They go from company to company. That's why I said jokingly, when that rat shows up in your town, the coal mine's shutting down. When that rat shows up in town, nurses are getting laid off. His face is one that only spells doom and gloom for the middle of America.
Behave unless they are regulated to ensure that their profit-seeking activities don't cause harm.
And in your view, if a company engages in criminal conduct, are the employees responsible for that conduct?
Well, obviously, there's a whole theory in law about how liability works. But yeah, if somebody undertakes illegal behavior, they are, as a general rule, liable and should be.
But bring that down to the practical level then. If you're working for a consultant to a company that's engaged in a massive price-fixing scheme, what's your responsibility?
Well, if you have anything to do with any wrongdoing, then you're responsible.
You have criticized some of McKinsey's more recent.
This is my favorite part. Is coming right now. He's locked in. He's locked in. He's like, I'm going to kill you. After this interview is over, I am going to assassinate you by drone strike. God, where's the company that you work for? A company
For downsizing. You've been on the front lines of corporate price fixing. You've been on the front lines of our misadventures.
I'm sorry,
of our misadventures in foreign policy. You've had direct experience of many of the things that make a lot of young people very angry about the way that this country is operating right now. You don't seem to embody that anger.
So the proposition that I've been on the front lines of corporate price fixing is just to get that out of the way.
You worked for a company that was fixing bread prices.
No. I worked for a consulting company that had a client that may have been involved in fixing, or was apparently in a scandal. I was not aware of the Canadian bread pricing scandal until last night.
But do you feel the anger that many young people feel about the state of...
Yeah, of course, because it destroyed my city. I grew up surrounded by crumbling factories.
Dude, it's like, it's so ominous. The switch up is so ominous. This is why I'm saying, like, pure bloodless sociopath. Only emotion you will ever get out of him is anger, okay? And resentment. It's phenomenal. This is one of the best clips to perfectly demonstrate how he operates.
And
I thought, what do I need to put on my resume to...
My city lost 30,000 of its 130,000 people, largely before I was born. So I'm under no illusions about the problems that are present in American capitalism generally, and were unleashed beginning with the Reagan era specifically. And while I may not be as emotive sometimes about my sense of anger or frustration or injustice, I would not be doing any of this if I were not propelled by a level of passion.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, I'm obviously passionate. I'm trying to be president. He said the same when babies were being poisoned by formula. Pete Buttigieg, hungry babies regrettably are just the price of free market. Wait, what? Where? Sitting down on CBS's Face the Nation this week, Transportation Secretary and billionaire darling Pete Buttigieg addressed the infant formula shortage that sent parents around the United States scrambling to find ways to feed their babies, asked about the sluggish federal response to a crisis regulators were informed about as far as back in October. Buttigieg absolved the Biden admin through a little bit of neoliberal sleight of hand. Let's be very clear. This is a capitalist country. The government does not make baby formula, nor should it. Companies make formula. It was the company that screwed up, Buttigieg insisted, and now it's the government's job to get the contaminated plant that helped lead to the shortage back up and running quickly and safely. At heart, this is just a lazy bit of political act covering. In reality, the Biden admin had a great deal of responsibility for what happened. This is true. This is literally true. Months prior, they should have figured out that there was like contamination occurring. What? You responded earlier. Can you not work in a consulting and be a proper good citizen though? You can't control the whole system. Brother, if you are working in a consulting agency, that's fine. Okay. Get your money up, not your funny up. But I don't want you anywhere near the presidency. That's it.